They said it was a rare pneumonia, a coincidence. Just a handful of factory workers falling ill in a Soviet city you've never heard of. But the truth, it was far worse than anyone dared admit. It was a leak, a breach, a bioweapon. And if the wind had blown just a little differently, it wouldn't have been a few dozen lives lost. It could have been a city. Sverdlovsk, a remote industrial hub deep within the Soviet Union, now known as Yekaterinburg, home to steel, soldiers, and secrets. It was a city closed to foreigners. What happened here didn't reach the West, unless the Kremlin allowed it. But beneath the smokestacks and worker apartments lay something else. Compound 19, a top-secret military lab that didn't exist on paper, and officially never made anything at all. On a quiet spring morning, workers at a nearby ceramics factory began to fall ill. It started with fever, headaches, chest pain. Within days, they were coughing blood. Doctors were confused. Some said pneumonia, others suspected food poisoning. But as more people collapsed, not just workers but children, shopkeepers, soldiers, panic spread. Within 4 days, 42 people were dead. Within a week, over 60. The bodies came in too fast to autopsy. Local officials called it an accidental exposure to contaminated meat, but families knew better. The KGB moved quickly. Medical records were seized. Bodies were buried fast, sometimes without proper death certificates. Foreign journalists were banned. Local doctors were warned it was tainted meat, nothing more. But behind the hospital walls, whispers grew. This wasn't food, it was airborne, it was sudden, it was precise. Still, the official line held. For the next 13 years, the Soviet Union denied any accident had taken place at all. Years later, defectors and scientists would confirm the horrifying truth. Compound 19 was manufacturing anthrax. Not for vaccines, not for research, but as a weapon. A clogged air filter had been removed from the lab's ventilation system, and someone forgot to replace it. For several hours, spores of one of the deadliest bacteria known to man escaped into the air. Invisible, odorless, carried by the wind. Anthrax doesn't spread from person to person, but when inhaled in spore form, it becomes nearly impossible to survive, even with treatment. If the wind had shifted by just a few degrees, it would have reached the city center. Tens of thousands could have died. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the truth began to surface. American researchers were finally allowed into Sverdlovsk. What they found was chilling. Patterns of death aligned perfectly with wind direction from the lab. Survivors described symptoms exactly matching inhalation anthrax. And buried in archives were reports of Soviet scientists desperately trying to contain a biological mistake they could never publicly admit. It was one of the greatest biological accidents in human history, and for years it was completely erased from public record. Today, we worry about new viruses, leaks, lab safety. The Sverdlovsk incident wasn't science fiction. It was a real event, hidden in plain sight. What makes it terrifying is how little it took. One missing filter, one failed checklist, and a culture of secrecy so powerful it risked its own people to maintain it. As countries build more labs and experiment with dangerous pathogens, this story is no longer just history, it's a warning. The people of Sverdlovsk didn't fall in battle. They weren't caught in crossfire. They died quietly, because someone chose silence over truth. In the end, it wasn't the bacteria that killed them, it was the cover-up. But history doesn't stay buried forever. Like anthrax spores hidden beneath the soil, the truth waits. And when the moment comes, it rises. Silent, invisible, undeniable. Some stories were never meant to be told. We tell them anyway. Subscribe to the Time Navigator, where forgotten voices are heard and the past finally speaks.